Who is she? Asked the mafia boss when he noticed the single mom eating alone in his restaurant. The rain over Greywater Bay wasn't a storm, it was an insistence. A fine, persistent mist that clung to the plate glass of the Aurelian room, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of wet asphalt and bleeding neon. The streetlights cast golden, fuzzy halos on the windows, a theatrical spotlight on a stage set for luxury. Inside, I was the anomaly. My name is Rowan Price. My hair, a simple brown, was pulled back in a knot that had started the day tight and was now surrendering to the humidity. My coat, draped over the back of the chair, was second-hand, its wool nap worn thin at the elbows. It smelled faintly of old paper in the public library where I'd just finished a 9-hour shift. This was my treat. One bowl of the roasted parsnip soup, velvety, rich, and costing more than my lunch budget for 3 days and a basket of bread I didn't have to bake myself. I sat at the smallest table, the one tucked away near the door, hoping to borrow a sliver of the restaurant's warmth before facing the long bus ride home to my daughter. The air in the Aurelian room was heavy, thick as velvet. You could almost taste it, the faint, sweet smoke of charred licorice from the bar's signature cocktail, the bright tang of citrus zest, the deep, oaky perfume of wines that cost more than my monthly rent. The soundtrack was a low, complicated jazz that felt like it was composed this year, all complex rhythms and breathy saxophone. It was a room built for quiet conversations that moved millions, for secrets whispered over gleaming silverware. I felt completely invisible, a mouse skirting the wainscoting of a palace, and yet, I also felt pinned. The sensation started as a prickle on my neck, the kind of awareness that makes you sit up straighter. I kept my eyes on my soup spoon, telling myself it was just the oppressive elegance of the place. I didn't belong, and my skin knew it. Then, the atmosphere didn't just change, it solidified. The main doors, heavy panels of smoked glass and bronze, didn't open, they slid silently into the wall. 2 men entered first. They were dressed in immaculate dark suits, their tailoring so sharp it looked like armor. They didn't scan the room, they dissected it, their eyes cataloging exits, threats, and faces with a chilling efficiency. They moved to flank the entrance. A moment later, he walked in. He was wearing a vest of charcoal gray over a crisp white shirt, no tie. He moved with a devastating, predatory grace, not like a man entering a restaurant, but like a man inspecting his territory. The low hum of the dining room, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation seemed to dip, to hold its breath as he passed. This was Lucien Armand. I didn't know the name, but I knew the power. It rolled off him like a physical force, a drop in temperature. His gaze swept the room once, a comprehensive, dismissive glance that took in the glittering chandeliers, the occupied booths, the bustling bar. And then his eyes found me. It wasn't a glance, it was an anchor. His gaze didn't slide off me, the way it had everyone else. It stopped. It held. There was no expression on his face. No judgment, no kindness, just a sudden, intense, and unbroken focus. I felt my stomach clench, my skin flush hot. I looked down at my spoon, but I could still feel the weight of his attention. It was physical. He paused, turning slightly toward the manager, who had materialized at his elbow, bowing almost imperceptibly. Lucien Armand didn't look at the man. He kept his eyes fixed on me, sitting frozen at my tiny table. He tilted his head, a fractional movement. His voice was low, not meant for me to hear, but in the sudden, pressurized silence, the words carried. "Who is she?" The manager stammered something I couldn't catch. A velvet curtain leading to a private alcove trembled slightly, as if the walls themselves had overheard a secret. I forced myself to break the contact, to look back at my half-eaten soup. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird in a small cage. I just wanted to leave. I fumbled for my wallet, my hands shaking. Before I could signal for the check, a different waiter approached my table, moving with a deference that was suddenly aimed at me. He placed a heavy-bottomed glass on the white linen. Inside, a deep red wine glowed like a ruby. "Complimentary. From the owner," the waiter whispered, his eyes respectfully avoiding mine. "He just wanted to wish you a good evening." My throat tightened. It wasn't a gift. It was a summons, a transaction. I looked across the room. Lucien Armand was now seated in the most prominent booth, flanked by his guards. Already in a quiet discussion with another man, he wasn't looking at me anymore. But I was marked. I felt a sudden, sharp surge of pride, or maybe just fear. "That's very kind," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "But I don't drink wine. Please, just the check." The waiter looked panicked. "Ma'am, it's just the check, please." I pulled out my prepaid debit card, the one I used for groceries, and placed it on the table with a decisive snap. I didn't touch the wine. I gathered my worn coat, sliding my arms into the familiar lining. I stood, slinging my heavy library tote over my shoulder. I walked past the bar, past the hushed, wealthy tables, and toward the silent glass doors. I didn't look back. I could feel his eyes on my spine every step of the way. The doors slid open, and the city's damp chill hit me. Outside, the light mist had turned into a full, driving rain. The wind was sharper here, funneling between the tall buildings of the financial district. I pulled my coat tighter and hurried toward the corner, toward the distant, welcoming glow of the bus stop 2 blocks down. My footsteps echoed, too loud on the wet pavement. I was halfway down the block when I heard it, not just the rain, but the low, guttural idle of a large engine pacing me. I glanced over my shoulder. A black SUV, not the Maybach from the restaurant, but something anonymous and bulky, was crawling along the curb beside me. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked solid. I walked faster. The SUV sped up just enough to keep pace. My heart leaped into my throat. This was the bad part of town, the part that was empty after 6 in the evening. There was no one. Just me, the rain, and this vehicle. I reached the intersection, the streetlight buzzing overhead, casting a sickly orange light. The SUV cut the corner, blocking the crosswalk. The passenger window hummed down. A man I'd never seen, with a thick neck and tattoos that disappeared into his collar, leaned across the seat. "Rowan Price," he yelled, his voice startlingly loud in the downpour. I froze. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a question. It was a summons. He knew my name. How could he possibly know my name? Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I took a step back, fumbling in my tote for my keys, for anything that could be a weapon. "Get in the car. Rowan, we just want to talk about what you found." Headlights, brighter than the sun, suddenly flooded the intersection, pinning us all in a brilliant white glare. The light came from behind me, swallowing my shadow. A black Maybach, gleaming like wet obsidian, slid to a perfect silent stop just inches from the SUV's bumper. The engine was so quiet, I hadn't heard it approach. The rear window of the Maybach lowered, smooth and silent. Lucien Armand was inside. He wasn't looking at the man in the SUV. He was looking at me. His face was calm, carved from stone, but his eyes were electric. "Get in," he said. His voice was not a request. It was a command, cutting through the sound of the rain. I stood paralyzed, trapped between 2 predators. The man in the SUV cursed, his eyes wide, recognizing the car, the man, the power. Lucien's gaze held mine. "This corner," he said, his voice dropping to a lower, more intimate timbre, "is darker and wetter than it is safe. Get in the car, Miss Price." The SUV's tires screamed on the wet pavement the second my fingers brushed the Maybach's heavy, chromed handle. The other vehicle fishtailed around the corner and vanished into the rain-slicked night. I scrambled into the car. The door closed behind me with a deeply satisfying, soundproof thunk. The world outside, the rain, the buzzing orange streetlight, the man who knew my name was instantly sealed away. The silence inside was absolute, heavy. It smelled of rich, clean leather and cold air. Lucien Armand was pressed against the far door, a chasm of plush seating between us. He was a study in stillness, a silhouette against the blur of the city lights passing by. "Where to, Miss Price?" The driver's voice was disembodied, coming from a hidden speaker, perfectly neutral. My voice was shaky. "The bus stop, the bus stop at 5th and Marine, please." The car glided forward, so smooth it felt more like floating than driving. "I'm not forcing you to do anything," Lucian said. His voice was quiet, yet it filled the entire cabin. "But you should be aware that someone just called you by name in the middle of a downpour. That is rarely a good sign." The adrenaline from the street corner finally curdled, mixing with the lingering humiliation from the restaurant, and it all turned into a sharp, sudden anger. And a complete stranger suddenly decides to become my bodyguard. You're paying an awful lot of attention to someone who just wanted a bowl of soup. His head turned slightly. The passing lights of Greywater Bay slid across his features, catching the hard, clean line of his jaw. Attention is my trade, Miss Price. Timely intervention is my specialty. "I don't need your specialty." The man in that SUV seemed to disagree. He paused. A silence that felt calculated. "What did you find at the library?" The question landed like a punch to the stomach. "How did you—" "I work at the library." It wasn't a question, he knew. "The Aurelian Room keeps meticulous records of its reservations. You made one 3 days ago. From a public terminal at the Bayview branch. I merely connected the observation to the situation on the street." "I'm a temp," I snapped, the word tasting like ash. "And it doesn't matter anyway. The whole branch is being shut down. Budget cuts." "Cuts mandated by whom?" "The Coastal Integrity Commission." I spat the name, the bureaucratic title feeling obscene. This new independent agency that sprang up overnight to decide what's fiscally responsible for the city. "The CIC," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a file being opened in his mind. "And these cuts just happened to coincide with someone wanting to talk to you." I felt the walls of the car closing in, and he was too calm, too precise. He was pulling threads I didn't even know were loose, and it terrified me. "Stop the car, please." The Maybach slowed its liquid glide. We were at the bus stop on 5th and Marine. It was deserted, the plastic shelter fogged with rain, looking like a cage under the weak streetlight. "This is a poor choice," Lucian stated. "It's my choice." I grabbed the chrome door handle. The lock clicked open. "As you wish." I tumbled out, back into the cold, wet air. The rain felt even heavier now. The Maybach didn't move. I turned my back on it, on him, and started walking, my steps fast and angry. I wouldn't run. Inside the car, I didn't see him, but I felt him make a subtle, dismissive gesture to his driver. The digital sign at the bus stop announced the next arrival in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, that felt like an eternity. I huddled under the flimsy shelter. My secondhand coat soaked through, clinging to my skin. I felt foolish, exposed, and cold. A block away, headlights cut through the rain, the same black SUV. My breath hitched. It tore down the street, ignoring the lane markings, and mounted the curb, its massive grille stopping just feet from where I stood. I backed against the shelter's wall, my heart hammering. The same tattooed man from the intersection jumped out of the passenger side. He was bigger up close, and he was no longer pretending to be polite. "You made a mistake, girlie," he snarled, advancing on me, his boots splashing in the gutter water. "He doesn't own this whole city. Now give me the device." I don't know what you're talking about." "The drive. The one from the archive room. Don't play stupid with me. Rowan." He lunged, not for me, but for the strap of my heavy tote bag. I screamed and pulled back, stumbling over the bench. "What device?" The voice was new. It came from the shadows behind the bus stop. It was one of the guards from the restaurant. He had stepped out of the alleyway as if he were poured from the darkness, his suit immaculate, his hands empty. The tattooed man froze, his hand still clamped on my bag strap. And then Lucian Armand himself stepped out of the rain. He wasn't in the Maybach. He was on foot, emerging from the street, his charcoal vest soaking up the downpour. He moved with that same lethal calm, hands in his pockets, as if he were merely pausing on a stroll. The tattooed man let go of my bag, his bravado shattering like glass. He looked from Lucien to the guard and back. This ain't your business, Armand," the man stammered, taking an involuntary step back. "You are on my street," Lucien said, his voice soft, almost conversational, yet it cut through the sound of the rain. "You are threatening my guest, and you are asking for an item that I now find myself deeply curious about. It is entirely my business." The tattooed man looked like he wanted to argue, but the absolute certainty in Lucien's eyes broke his nerve. He scrambled backward, falling into the passenger seat of the SUV. He slammed the door. The vehicle tore away, its engine roaring, running the red light at the end of the block as it fled. The silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. Lucien stopped directly in front of me. He didn't chase. He didn't raise his voice. He just watched the retreating taillights for a beat. Then his gaze settled on me. I was shivering violently, clutching my bag so hard my knuckles were white. He shrugged out of his heavy, perfectly tailored suit jacket. It had to be worth more than I made in 3 months. He held it out to me. "You're wet." "I don't need protection," I whispered, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely form the words. He didn't pull the jacket back. His eyes held mine, dark and unblinking. "I don't sell protection, Miss Price," he said, his voice dropping low. "I buy trouble, and you, it seems, have just become a very interesting acquisition." I stared at the jacket, then at his face. I didn't move. He let out a small, impatient sigh. He didn't force it on me. Instead, he tossed the expensive jacket onto the wet, grimy bus stop bench. "One of my men will see you home. A different car, less conspicuous." He turned, without waiting for a thank you, and walked back into the darkness. A moment later, the Maybach's engine whispered to life and pulled away. I didn't take the jacket, but I took the ride. The silent guard drove me in a bland gray sedan, following my shaky directions to Dockside Walk. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a pre-war walk-up that always smelled of damp plaster and old cooking, but it was my fortress. I locked the deadbolt, slid the chain across, and finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding since I left the restaurant. I leaned against the solid wood of the door, my legs weak. The apartment was quiet. In the corner of our small living room, a cheap plastic nightlight, shaped like a blue whale, cast a gentle, aquatic glow. My daughter, Mira, was asleep on the pull-out sofa. She was 6. Her breathing was soft and even. Her small hand curled around the ear of a threadbare stuffed rabbit. She was the anchor of my life, the only thing that mattered. I stood there, watching her sleep, and the terror of the last hour washed over me. They knew my name. They knew where I worked. They were willing to grab me off the street. I walked numbly into the tiny kitchenette and dumped my tote bag onto the chipped laminate counter. My wallet, my keys, my library ID, a half-eaten granola bar. And at the bottom, glinting in the blue light from the other room, was a small, silver rectangle, a mini USB drive. I had found it yesterday, wedged between 2 old server casings in the library's back archive room. I'd thought it was just lost property. I slipped it into my pocket, meaning to turn it in, and then I had forgotten. I stood there in my damp, cold clothes, my fingers closing around the cold metal. I thought about the man in the SUV demanding the device, and I thought about Lucien Armand, a man who owned a place like the Aurelian Room, who moved like a shadow, and who, when faced with a violent thug on a dark street, looked utterly, completely, and terrifyingly calm. How did that man know I had it? And why? I wondered, my thumb tracing the sharp edge of the drive. Was I more afraid of the man who had just saved me? The blue light of the whale. Nightlight was fading against the thin, gray dawn filtering through the blinds. Mira was still asleep, her small body a warm lump under the blankets. For a moment, the world was just this, the quiet hiss of the radiator, the smell of sleeping child, the heavy silence of a third-floor walk-up, but the night before was a stone in my stomach. The men, the car, the name, my name, shouted in the rain. I couldn't stay still. I made coffee I didn't taste and toast I couldn't eat. I checked the deadbolt 3 times. "Mommy, is it school time?" Mira's voice cut through the fog of my fear. I turned, manufacturing a smile that felt brittle. "It is, Sweet Pea. Up and at 'em. We've got a world to educate." The walk to Bayview Elementary was usually the best part of my day. Today, it was a gauntlet. Every car that slowed, every person who glanced our way, made my skin crawl. Dockside Walk was waking up delivery trucks rattling over potholes. The smell of the bakery on the corner, but I felt like I was walking through a war zone. 2 blocks from the school, I saw it. A dark gray sedan, not the SUV from last night, nothing so aggressive, just a boring 4-door car parked in a no-standing zone. A man was in the driver's seat, his face buried in a phone. He didn't look up, but his presence was a shout. They were watching. They knew where my daughter went to school. I physically shielded Mira's body with my own, pulling her closer as we hurried past. "Mommy, you're squishing me." "Sorry, baby, just cold." I kissed her goodbye at the gate, the concrete bright with chalk drawings. The smile I gave her was the hardest thing I'd ever done. "Have the best day. Be brave. Listen to Miss Alani. I'll see you at 3. I love you." "Love you, too," she called, already running toward the kickball game. I watched her until she disappeared inside the brick building, a solid, safe place I could no longer trust. Turning away, I felt utterly exposed. The gray sedan was still there. I walked in the opposite direction, my mind racing, trying to draw a map of how my life had shattered in less than a week. It started with a donation. 4 days ago, the library had received a massive gift, a dozen pallets of old server equipment from Neon Harbor Ventures, the tech conglomerate owned by Calder Knox. Knox was Greywater Bay's golden boy, the one who built his gleaming waterfront towers and promised to digitize knowledge for the community. Mr. Henderson, the head librarian and my boss, had been ecstatic. He's funding our whole digital archive for the next 5 years. Rowan, all we have to do is catalog his old corporate hardware for donation. My job was to go through the servers in the basement archive room before they were wiped. It was dull work, until, on the 3rd server, I found a folder that wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't encrypted. It was just hidden, labeled BUH_logistics. Curiosity, my weakness. I clicked. It wasn't logistics. It was a blueprint for social cleansing. There were contracts, hundreds of them, between a high-end real estate fund and the Bureau of Urban Harmonics. The BUH was another new city agency, like the CIC, supposedly formed to improve neighborhood quality of life. Their idea of improvement was mass eviction. I saw maps. I saw lists of names. I saw timelines. They were using legal loopholes to condemn entire blocks of low-income housing in Dockside Walk, in Bayview, in my neighborhood, all to make way for the luxury condos and office parks that would service Knox's new tech harbor. I felt sick. I was sitting in the dusty, quiet dark, looking at a plan to systematically destroy my home. I saw a small silver USB drive on the floor by the server rack, probably dropped by a technician, a backup drive, on pure, unthinking instinct. I copied the entire BUH_logistics folder. I was going to show Mr. Henderson he would know what to do. As the file transfer bar completed, I glanced at the security monitor on the cart. The feed from the archive room camera flickered, then died. A small, digital clock in the corner of the black screen began to count. 1 minute, 2 minutes, at exactly 3 minutes. The feed snapped back on, showing me exactly as I had been sitting at the terminal. A technical glitch. I ejected the drive, my hand shaking, and slipped it into my pocket. I locked the archive room. The next morning, the Coastal Integrity Commission announced their snap audit of the library. By noon, Mr. Henderson, who had dedicated 30 years of his life to that building, was suspended for gross fiscal mismanagement and data irregularities. And I, the temporary library assistant, was reassigned. They moved me to the night shift, where I wouldn't see anyone, where I couldn't talk to anyone. They were cleaning house. They knew someone had been in that server, and they were watching to see who flinched. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from the memory. I was blocks from the school, standing on a random street corner. It was a text from an anonymous, blocked number. "Return what isn't yours. 7 p.m., Pier 14. Come alone, don't be stupid." Pier 14. It was a rotting husk, a place teenagers went to drink. It was a place you went to disappear. My first instinct was to call the police, but what would I say that a man in a car yelled my name, and now I got a scary text? They would tell me it was a prank, and worse. What if they were part of it? The BOH was a city agency. I tried another route. Torn. The city's new threat and obstruction response network, a civilian security hotline praised by the mayor. I called. I was put on hold for 4 minutes listening to tinny classical music. Torn. This is Operator 22. The voice was bored, indifferent. My name is Rowan Price. I'm being threatened. Someone is demanding I meet them at Pier 14 tonight. They've been following me. They know where my daughter goes to school. Are you in immediate physical danger, ma'am? Yes, I think so. Tonight, at 7. So, not immediate. Did they explicitly threaten bodily harm in this text message? They said, "Don't be stupid. They want me to bring something." A sigh. "Ma'am, we can't dispatch a unit based on an ambiguous text. Our recommendation, if you are in possession of property that does not belong to you, is always to cooperate with its return." My blood ran cold. "You want me to go?" "We are advising you to resolve the property dispute." "Yes. Thank you for calling Torn." The line clicked. I stood on the sidewalk, the phone limp in my hand. The system wasn't just failing. It was actively feeding me to the wolves, the CIC, the BUH, Torn. They were all connected, all part of the same clean corporate machine that was pushing us out. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. No, not completely. My fingers fumbled in my wallet, past my useless library card, past Mira's last school photo. I pulled out a piece of cardstock, thick, expensive, cream-colored. Inez Corval, general manager, the Aurelian Room. The woman who had watched me refuse Lucien Armand's wine. She had brought the check herself, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You handled that with grace," she'd said quietly, pressing the card into my hand. "If you ever find yourself needing proper assistance." At the time, I'd thought it was strange. Now, it felt like a lifeline. My fingers were numb and shaking, but I typed out the text. "My name is Rowan Price. I was at your restaurant last night. I am in serious trouble. I am being told to go to Pier 14 at 7 p.m. The police won't help. I don't know who else to call." I hit send. The reply came back in less than 30 seconds. It was from a different number. "This is a poor venue for a negotiation. Stay away from the docks. A car will be at your apartment at 7:30. It wasn't signed, but I knew. It was him. An hour later, there was a sharp, professional knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. A courier in a crisp, dark uniform stood there, holding a thick, embossed envelope. I opened the door, just a crack, the chain still on. He slid the envelope through. Inside was a heavy, linen-finished invitation. The Aurelian Room, in partnership with Neon Harbor Ventures, is pleased to host the Bayview Children's Fund charity auction. My stomach dropped. Neon Harbor Ventures, Calder Knox. Tucked inside the invitation was a small, stiff note. The handwriting was bold, black ink. "Be my guest, 8 p.m. We will arrange somewhere much brighter than that damp dock, and we will discuss what you found." The car that arrived at 7:30 was not the anonymous gray sedan. It was the Maybach. I had sent Mira to our downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Yates, a kind woman with a cloud of white hair and a perpetually flour-dusted apron. I'd given her $40, my grocery money for the next week, and told her it was a mandatory staff meeting at the library. The lie tasted like acid, but Mira was safe, happily baking cookies. The dress was a rental, a simple, floor-length sheath of midnight blue silk that had cost another $30 I couldn't afford. It was the only thing in the shop that didn't look like a prom costume. My hair was down, brushed until it shone, and my only jewelry was a pair of small silver studs. I looked like what I was, a woman in a borrowed costume. The driver, the same silent one from the night before, opened the door for me. I slid in. Lucien Armand was not inside. I was alone in the cavernous, leather-scented quiet. The Aurelian room was unrecognizable. Last night, it had been a temple of quiet, exclusive dining. Tonight, it was a glittering machine. The room was packed. Women in diamonds and dresses that looked sculpted from light laughed over flutes of champagne. Men in sharp tuxedos moved in tight clusters, their voices a low, confident hum. A jazz trio played on a small stage, faster and brighter than the night before. I walked in, and the invisibility I'd felt at my small table was gone. Here, in my simple dress. I was a glaring spotlight of not belonging. Heads turned, eyes lingered, assessed, and dismissed me. He was standing near the grand, arched windows overlooking the bay, in conversation with two men who looked like senators. He was in a black tuxedo, perfectly cut, no vest this time. He looked bored, his face a mask of polite interest. And then he saw me. His conversation stopped mid-word. The senators looked over their shoulders to see what had captured his attention. Lucien's expression did not change, but the focus of his gaze was so intense it felt like a physical touch across the crowded room. He excused himself from the politicians, his apology a curt nod. He moved toward me. The crowd, sensing his trajectory, simply parted. It was like watching a shark glide through a school of fish. He didn't push. He just moved. And space was created for him. He stopped a foot in front of me, up close. He was taller than I'd realized. The scent of clean linen and something sharp, like mint, clung to him. His eyes scanned my face, not my dress, and the cold, assessing power I'd seen before was gone. His gaze softened. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. He saw the exhaustion under the concealer, the fine lines of stress around my eyes. He was not looking at the librarian or the woman with the USB drive. He was looking at the tired young mother. "Miss Price," he said. His voice was a low vibration. "Just for me. You look singular." "I look like I rented a dress, Mr. Armand." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Honesty is refreshing in this room. May I?" He offered his arm. It was not a request. I placed my hand on the impossibly fine wool of his sleeve, and he guided me into the heart of the storm. "The man you are here to see," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear as he leaned in. "Calder knocks. Enjoys making an entrance. He will be late. Until then, we are simply two guests enjoying the party." The jazz trio finished their song and, as if on cue, slid into a slow, classic standard, something soft and familiar. He didn't ask. He simply guided me onto the small, polished dance floor set up beneath the massive crystal chandelier. He placed one hand on my lower back, and I put my hand on his shoulder. We were a proper, respectful distance apart, but the heat of his palm through the thin silk was startling. We moved slowly, a simple box step. He was a perfect, effortless leader. Everyone was watching us. "You have a daughter," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, Mira, she's 6. The words were out before I could stop them. My heart clenched. "She must be the center of your world." "She is my entire world." I looked up at him, my fear hardening into defiance, "which is why I am here." "I know." His gaze was steady. "You are not the first person to walk into my restaurant carrying a secret you cannot afford to keep." "And what about you?" I asked, a sudden boldness taking me. "What is the Armand circle, your network?" He didn't stiffen. He didn't pull away. He just continued his smooth, steady lead, pulling me slightly closer as another couple brushed past. My family has been in Greywater Bay since the first ships laid the first stones at the docks. We are the mortar. We hold things together that the legal world would prefer to let crumble. We solve problems, the ones the police cannot, and the ones the politicians create. So you're a criminal. His hand on my back remained steady. I am not a legal man, Miss Price, but I have laws, and my laws are stricter than any you will find in a courthouse. He paused, his dark eyes holding mine. My first law, women and children, are inviolable. They are not bargaining chips. They are not collateral. They are not to be touched, ever. I stared at him, my breath caught in my chest. He was telling me that I was safe, that Mira was safe. He was making a promise in the language of his own dark world. The men last night, I whispered. They knew where she went to school. His features hardened, the warmth vanishing, replaced by a cold, Arctic fury that was terrifying in its stillness. They will not make that mistake again. The song ended. The room was too hot, too bright. I felt dizzy, caught between the smell of expensive perfume and the raw, dangerous promise he had just made. I need some air, I said. He nodded, taking my hand. He didn't release it. He laced his fingers through mine, a casual gesture of possession that was anything but, and led me not back to the party, but toward a set of glass doors I hadn't noticed. We stepped out onto a long, stone balcony. The party noise instantly muffled, replaced by the deep, rhythmic hush of the waves crashing against the seawall far below. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and sharp with the smell of salt and wet stone. I went straight to the balustrade, gripping the cold marble. My knuckles were white. I was trembling. It was the cold. I told myself. It was the adrenaline. It was the terror of what I was about to do. You're cold. He was standing behind me. He stepped to a small, carved chest in the corner and took out a heavy pashmina shawl, the color of claret. He draped it over my shoulders. His movements were smooth, but as he settled the wool around my throat, his fingers brushed the bare skin of my wrist. It was not a brush. It was a brand, a jolt of soft, sharp electricity that shot up my arm and straight into my chest, making my heart skip a beat. It was over in a second, an accident of proximity. But neither of us moved. I turned to face him. He was very close. I could see the individual threads in his tuxedo, the way the dim balcony light caught the silver in his dark hair at the temples. The wind was pulling strands of my hair across my face. "Rowan," he said, his voice a low gravel. He didn't say my last name. He lifted a hand, his touch impossibly gentle, and tucked the loose strands of hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm against the frozen shell of my ear, and they lingered, his thumb stroking the skin just below my jaw. I should have pulled away. I should have been terrified. This man was danger. He was the kind of power that consumed people like me. But his eyes were not predatory. They were searching. I leaned into his touch, a fractional, involuntary movement. That was all the invitation he needed. He bent his head. He was slow, agonizingly slow. I watched his eyes close as his mouth drew nearer. I had every chance to turn away, to stop him. My own eyes fluttered shut. His lips touched mine. It was not a kiss of passion, not the bruising demand I would have expected from a man like him. It was a kiss of profound, staggering tension. It was a question, a discovery. His lips were firm and warm against mine, and they tasted of mint in the cold night air. He breathed in, a small, unsteady breath, and the kiss deepened slightly. It was still restrained, his control absolute, but there was a fire banked deep beneath it. His other hand came up, not to grab me, not to pull me closer, but to rest on the silk at my lower back, a gesture of support, of pure, respectful possession. His gaze, when he opened his eyes just a slit, was asking a silent question. Is this allowed? My answer was to lift my hand, the one that wasn't clutching the shawl, and lay it flat on his chest. It was a desperate, grounding gesture. I felt the solid muscle beneath the fine fabric of his shirt, and under my palm, his heart. It was not calm. It was hammering, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. That was my testimony. He broke the kiss, pulling back just an inch. His forehead rested against mine. We were breathing the same air, our breath pluming in the cold. His hands were still on my back, mine on his chest. We had crossed a line, and both of us knew it. "Rowan," he whispered, his voice rough. Before I could answer, before I could find my own voice, a sharp, feminine voice cut through the private bubble we had built. "Lucian?" We sprang apart. I stumbled back against the balustrade, pulling the shawl tight. Inez Corval, the general manager, stood in the doorway, her face an impassive mask. She did not acknowledge me. "He's here," she said, her voice flat. "Knox has arrived." The moment was shattered, the warmth, the electric tension, the staggering, forbidden connection, it all evaporated, replaced by the icy chill of the real world. Lucian turned from me. In that single movement, he was no longer the man whose heart had beaten against my palm. He was Lucien Armand again, the owner of this territory, the master of his laws. "Thank you. Inez, have him shown to the bar. I will be there in a moment." "Yes, sir." She vanished. Lucian adjusted his cuffs. He looked at me, his eyes once again cool, assessing, impenetrable. But I knew. I had felt his heart. I clutched my small, rented purse. Inside, I could feel the sharp, rectangular outline of the USB drive. He held out his arm to escort me back inside. "It wasn't just about a dance," I whispered. "No," he said, his voice flat. "It never was." We stepped back into the glittering ballroom, and the spell was broken. The warmth of the balcony, the pressure of his lips, the staggering rhythm of his heart beneath my hand, it all evaporated, replaced by the blast of bright jazz and the cold reality of the room. My hand was still laced in his. He did not release it. He led me back toward the center of the floor, his face an impassive mask, his jaw set. He was no longer the man who had kissed me. He was the proprietor, and I was his possession. Calder Knox entered the room not with a bang, but with a smile. He was exactly as he appeared in his profiles, expensive. Faded jeans, immaculate white sneakers, and a soft black turtleneck that probably cost more than my car. He looked like he was about to give a TED Talk on how to disrupt poverty. His smile was wide, friendly, and utterly lifeless. He was flanked by his own men, but he immediately moved to shake hands with the city officials gathered near the bar, the same men from the Coastal Integrity Commission and the Bureau of Urban Harmonics. They laughed at something he said, clapping him on the back. They weren't associates, they were employees. The conspiracy was not in a folder in the dark. It was here, drinking champagne under a crystal chandelier. "Lucian," Knox called out, spotting him. He strode toward us, his smile fixed. "Glad I could make it. We're raising a lot of money for the kids tonight." He turned his smile on me, but it faltered. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, lingered. He was scanning me, the way a computer scans a corrupted file, looking for the error. "And you are?" he asked. "Rowan Price." Lucian answered for me, his voice smooth as silk. He pulled me half a step closer. "Rowan is my guest tonight. She's a great admirer of your community outreach projects." Knox's gaze didn't leave my face. "Rowan Price," he repeated slowly, tasting the name. "Have we met before? You seem familiar. Do you work in the tech space?" My mouth was dry. The small, cold weight of the USB drive in my rented purse felt like it was screaming. "No," I managed, my voice steady. "I'm a librarian." The word hung in the air. Knox's smile tightened. Just a fraction. A librarian, how wonderful. Preserving the past. "And protecting the present," Lucian added, his tone light. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Calder, the auction is starting." He steered me away, but I felt Knox's pale, analytical gaze on my back. He knew. The auction began. The city councilman was on stage, reading platitudes from a card. Calder Knox was the guest of honor. He took the stage to a round of applause, his microphone held casually, his posture relaxed. "We believe in Greywater Bay," he said, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. "We believe that every child, regardless of their zip code, deserves access to the future. That's why tonight, Neon Harbor Ventures is pledging $1 million to fund a new tech bus that will bring coding and advanced sciences to our most underserved neighborhoods." The room erupted in applause. I felt sick. He was promising a bus to the very children whose homes he was systematically stealing. I glanced away from the stage and saw them. Two men, in dark suits that didn't fit the party, were moving not toward the bar, but toward the service corridors in the back. They spoke into their cuffs. They weren't guests. They were Knox's security. "They're searching for me," I whispered, my hand tightening on Lucian's arm. "No," Lucian murmured, his eyes fixed on the stage. "They're not searching. They're sealing. They know you're here. The invitation was the trap." "Then why did you bring me—" "Because," he said, turning his dark gaze on me, "this is my house, and I wanted to see his face when I walked in with you." When Knox finished his speech, stepping down to more applause, Lucian intercepted him. "Calder, a moment." Knox turned, his smile returning. "Lucian, a fantastic evening." "Indeed. I just remembered. I have that '68 Margot you were inquiring about. It's in my private cellar. Perhaps a celebratory glass for the children." The lure was cast. Knox's eyes lit up. "I would be honored." "Rowan, please join us," Lucian said, his hand finding my back. It was not a question. He led us away from the party, down a short hall and into a small, temperature-controlled room lined with dark wood and sleeping bottles, the wine room. He shut the heavy door, and the sound of the auction vanished. The silence was immediate and suffocating. Lucian poured 2 glasses, ignoring me. He handed one to Knox. "To the future," Knox said, lifting his glass. "To the truth," Lucian replied, his glass not moving. Knox took a sip, his smile finally fading. He set the glass down. "All right, Lucian, the games are over. An interesting choice of guest. She works at the Bayview Library, the temp assigned to the archives. In fact, she has a passion for community history," Lucian said mildly, swirling his wine. "She has a passion," Knox countered, his voice hardening, "for property that does not belong to her. A Neon Harbor drive went missing from that archive. It contains sensitive, proprietary corporate data. I'm here to collect it." "The files I saw weren't about corporate data," I said, my voice shaking but sharp. "They were eviction notices. They were contracts with the BUH. They were maps of my neighborhood." Knox ignored me, his gaze locked on Lucian. "She doesn't understand the complexities of urban renewal. She has something of mine, and I want it back. Now. This is a simple matter of corporate theft." Lucian took a slow, deliberate sip. "And she is my guest." The 5 words landed with the weight of stone. "Your guest," Knox scoffed. "Your rules don't apply here. Armand, this isn't one of your dockside disputes. That drive is an interstate commerce issue. This is a federal matter." As he said the word, federal, Lucian glanced past him, through the small glass window in the door, out into the main lobby. His eyes narrowed. "They're already here, aren't they?" Lucian said. He moved to the door and opened it just a crack. I saw what he saw. My heart stopped. Lucian's men, the ones in the sharp suits, were positioned by the exits, but there were new men in the room, men in cheaper, ill-fitting dark suits. They were scanning the crowd, their expressions bored and official. They were agents. "IFCD," Lucian said, his voice low. "Interstate Financial Crimes Directorate. Knox didn't come here to ask. Rowan, he came here to take. He's using federal agents as his personal repo service." Knox smiled. "Like I said, a simple matter of returning lost property. Give me the drive, and she can go home to— What is it?" "Mira. Her daughter." A cold, white-hot rage, purer than any I had ever felt, burned through my fear. I turned to Lucian. I need the ladies' room. Lucian met my gaze. He saw the fire in it. He understood instantly. Inez will show you. He opened the door. Inez Corval was standing right there, as if she had been waiting. See, miss, price to the powder room, Lucian said. He turned back to Knox, blocking the doorway. Now, Calder, let's discuss the actual price of this bottle. Inez grabbed my arm. Not the powder room, this way. She didn't lead me to the plush, public restroom. She pulled me through a swinging door, and we were in the blast furnace heat and clattering chaos of the kitchen. What do you need? She snapped, her eyes scanning every entrance. I need a computer, a secure terminal, not on your network. I have to make a copy. I have to upload it. If they take this drive, I have nothing. Mira has nothing. Inez nodded, pulling me through the steam and shouting into a small, cramped office. This is my terminal. It's wired to a private satellite uplink. You have 2 minutes. My hands flew. I plugged in the drive. The files were there, encrypted, inside a compressed folder. I pulled up a secure, anonymous cloud service, one I knew from my library data training. I started the upload. The progress bar was agonizingly slow. 1 minute passed. My heart was in my throat. 90% wait, 95. A piercing electronic shriek split the air. Not a bell, a modern, unbearable fire alarm. Emergency strobe lights began to flash, painting the stainless steel kitchen in pulses of red. The kitchen staff panicked, dropping pans. They triggered it. Inez yelled over the noise. They're moving. You have to go. It's not done. 99%? Upload complete. I ripped the drive from the port just as the office door flew open. It wasn't Inez's staff. It was 2 of Knox's men, the ones I'd seen backstage. Before they could even register, Lucian was there. He moved past me, not attacking them, but grabbing me. This way. He didn't pull me back into the kitchen. He yanked me into the service corridor. It was pandemonium. Wealthy guests, panicked, were trying to push through the staff exits. Knox's men were right behind us, shoving people aside. There she is. Grab her. This exit is compromised. Lucian snarled. He looked around, his eyes wild, not with panic, but with calculation. He was a general on a battlefield. He saw it. A large, rectangular ventilation duct, part of the building's old infrastructure. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy, brass fire extinguisher from the wall mount. Knox's men were 10 feet away. Lucian, I screamed. He didn't use it to fight. He reversed it, and with a grunt that seemed torn from his chest, he swung the heavy base of the extinguisher like a battering ram into the center of the duct. The sound of crumpling metal was deafening. He hit it again. The metal sheet gave way, revealing a dark, cavernous opening. Fake smoke from the alarm system began to pour out. It's the old exhaust system. It leads to the alley, he yelled. Go now. He shoved me through the jagged metal opening. I tumbled into the darkness. It was cold and smelled of dust and rust. I heard a grunt and a thud from behind me, the sound of bodies hitting the wall. Lucian landed in the shaft next to me. Move! We crawled on our hands and knees, the sound of the alarm fading. We emerged onto a rusty, grated landing for a service stairwell. We clattered down the metal stairs, 3 flights, our steps echoing in the narrow brick shaft. He kicked the bar on the alley door. It burst open. We fell out into the wet, dark alley. The rain had started again. A white van, with the words Bay Harbor Janitorial peeling on the side, was idling, its lights off. The side door slid open. Inez was at the wheel. Get in, she commanded. We dove into the dark, cavernous back of the van. The door slammed shut, plunging us into total darkness just as we heard shouts from the stairwell door above us. The van's engine revved, the tires spinning on the wet cobblestones, and we were thrown against the metal wall as we rocketed out of the alley, turning away from the main streets and disappearing into the city's dark, forgotten underbelly. The van smelled of bleach and old, wet rags. We were thrown around in the dark for what felt like an hour, the vehicle taking sharp, illogical turns designed to lose anyone or anything that might have followed. I sat pressed against Lucian, his tuxedo jacket ruined, his arm a rigid bar of muscle against my side. I was still clutching my cheap rental bag, the USB drive inside a solid, terrifying weight against my hip. Finally, the van slowed, rattling over a different kind of terrain, not pavement, but old, uneven brick. It rolled to a stop. The engine cut, and the silence that rushed in was enormous, filled only with the sound of lapping water and the distant cry of a gull. The side door slid open. We were not in a garage. We were inside a vast, dark space. The air was cold and thick with the smell of salt, rust, and damp, ancient wood, an abandoned shipyard. "This way," Inez said, already out and moving. "We're secure." Lucian got out, his movements stiff, and turned to help me down. His hand was steady, but his knuckles were scraped raw from where he had smashed the ventilation duct. We were in a massive, cathedral-like workshop, filled with the skeletons of old boats. In the far corner, a small section had been walled off, turned into a makeshift apartment. A figure stepped out of the lit doorway. It was Mrs. Yates, my neighbor. My heart stopped. Oh God, Mira. "She's fine, dear," Mrs. Yates said, her voice the calmest thing I had heard in 24 hours. "Just fine. Mr. Armand's young man picked us up hours ago, said there was a gas leak on our block. Very thorough." Lucian's foresight was a physical blow. He had not just planned for my escape. He had secured my entire world before I even knew it was in danger. I rushed past him into the small, clean rooms there. Sitting at a battered wooden table under a single hanging bulb was Mira. She was in her pajamas, her hair sleep-tousled. She was not crying. She was focused, her small tongue sticking out in concentration. "Mommy," she squealed, jumping up. I caught her, burying my face in her hair, breathing in her scent of soap and sleep. "You're okay. You're okay." "Look," she said, squirming free. She held up a lopsided, brightly colored paper crane. "Mrs. Yates is teaching me origami." I knelt, holding her small, warm shoulders, my knees weak with relief. Lucian filled the doorway behind me, and he was on his phone, his back to us. His voice was no longer the one I knew. It was flat, cold, and absolute. "Lock it down, the entire district. I want eyes on every IFCD agent in this city. Yes, I mean everyone, and get me Knox's private flight plan." He was the Armand boss, the man who owned streets, who moved people like chess pieces. He finished his call and slipped the phone into his pocket. His gaze fell on Mira. She held up her paper crane to him, a silent offering. He walked past me. The small apartment had a tiny, dusty kitchen area with a hot plate and a half-empty refrigerator. He opened it, found a carton of milk. He poured it into a small, clean saucepan. He found a tin of cocoa powder in a cupboard. I stood and watched, paralyzed by the cognitive dissonance. This man, who had just orchestrated a violent, high-stakes extraction, who commanded a private army, was now standing in a safe-house kitchen, slowly whisking milk and chocolate over a hot plate. He even added a small shake of cinnamon he found. He tasted it first, a small, careful sip, then poured the hot chocolate into a chipped ceramic mug. "This is for a master crane folder," he said, his voice soft. He handed the mug to Mira. She giggled and took it, blowing on the steam. He was a monster. He was a protector. He was a man making cocoa for my child. I didn't know how to reconcile the three. An hour later, Mira was asleep on a patched sofa, her paper crane scattered around her. Mrs. Yates was knitting in a rocking chair, her needles clicking a soft, steady rhythm. The picture of domestic peace was so profound, it was grotesque. Lucian was standing by the large, salt-stained window, looking out at the dark, restless water of the bay. I went to him. "Thank you," I whispered. The words felt small, stupid. "She was safe with Mrs. Yates. You didn't have to bring them here." "Yes," he said, not looking at me. "I did. Knox threatened your daughter to me. He made her part of the equation. Now, she stays where I can see her." The cold finality of it made me shiver. I need you to understand something, Mr. Armand. Lucien, I can't repay this. I have no money. I have no power. This isn't a transaction. I cannot be bought. He turned from the window. The room was dim, lit only by the one lamp over Mrs. Yates and the moonlight from the window. His face was in shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. I told you, he said, his voice a low rumble. I don't buy people, I buy trouble. You uploaded the files, didn't you? In the kitchen. Yes. Then you are holding nothing. You are simply a witness. Knocks won't stop until you are silenced. I don't want your gratitude. Rowan, I want your trust. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the click of the needles and the sound of the wind. He stepped closer, into the faint moonlight. You're shaking, he said. I'm terrified. He lifted his hand, the one with the scraped knuckles, and laid it against my cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. So am I. I leaned into his palm, a small, involuntary confession. His other hand came up, framing my face. He studied me, his dark eyes searching mine, and then he leaned in and kissed me. This was not the kiss on the balcony. That had been a question, a spark in the cold. This was a conflagration. It was deep and raw and desperate. Fueled by the adrenaline and the terror of the night, it was the release of every ounce of fear I had held, and he met it, his mouth moving against mine with a hunger that stole my breath. I didn't pull away. I surged into him, my hands clinging to his jacket, then moving up, my fingers tangling in his hair, finding the solid, warm skin of his neck. I put my hands on his jaw, feeling the sharp, sanding paper texture of his stubble. It was the most real thing I had felt all night. A low groan rumbled in his chest. His hands locked on my waist, no longer gentle. He lifted me. I weighed nothing to him. He didn't pull me against him. He lifted me up, setting me on the edge of the heavy wooden workbench that lined the wall. The old wood was cool through my rented silk dress. I was surrounded by him. His body was a wall of heat, pressed between my knees. His mouth left mine, trailing a hot, open-mouthed path along my jaw, to the pulse hammering in my throat. We were both breathing in ragged, broken gasps. We were still fully dressed, but my skin was on fire. "Rowan," he whispered, his voice thick, his lips against my neck. "Please," I breathed, my hands gripping his shoulders. "Wait." He froze. His entire body went rigid. He rested his forehead against mine. His eyes closed. His chest was heaving. "Wait," he repeated, as if tasting the word. A small, sleepy sound came from the sofa. "Mommy?" "Mira." She had turned over, her voice thick with sleep. We didn't move. We were two statues, locked together after a long, agonizing moment. Mira sighed, settling back into a deep sleep. Lucien pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes were black in the darkness. We looked at each other. Over the line we had almost annihilated. A slow, shaky smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile of victory. It was one of shared, astonished restraint. He nodded, a tiny gesture of agreement. He chose restraint. He stepped back, putting space between us, and my body instantly felt cold. He handed me a bottle of water from a case on the floor. His hand was perfectly steady now. "You're taking an incredible risk," he said, his voice still rough. "All for a library." I took a shaky sip of water. It's not just a library. Not to me. My dream. I was saving up. I wanted to open a free reading club for the dockside kids. A place that's warm and safe, where they can just be. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. A safe house. "Yes," I whispered. "I guess it is." I looked at him. "What about you? Your law, about women and children, why it's not a normal law for a man in your business." He turned and looked out the dark, salt-stained window again. He was silent for a long time. When I was 22, my father was still in charge. I was just learning. There was a man, a low-level operator who owed my father money, but that wasn't his real sin. What he was doing to his wife, to his 4-year-old son. Lucian's voice went flat, all emotion draining from it. The system had been called. They gave him a warning, a restraining order he laughed at. The woman was terrified. She came to my father, begging. My father told her it was a domestic matter, not our business. He closed his fist, the scraped knuckles turning white. That night, I made it my business. I went to that apartment. I handled him. I gave him a finality. I took the woman and her son, set them up in a new city, new names. My father was furious. What did he do? He promoted me. He said I had finally understood. The system is broken. It protects the predators. It fails the victims. So I made my law. The system can have its rules. I will have mine. I will protect the ones it fails. The story hung in the air, cold and hard as steel. A laptop in the corner, one Inez had left open, pinged, a single sharp sound. Lucian walked to it. Inez had set up a secure feed. A message was scrolling across. He read it, and his face hardened. "They did it," he said. "The BUH just got an emergency warrant for your arrest, signed by a federal judge. Data intrusion and corporate espionage. It's being broadcast. They've flagged you as a fugitive." The floor dropped out from under me. "They'll find me. They'll take Mira." Lucian shook his head, his eyes blazing. "They aren't trying to find you. They're trying to discredit you, to poison the well. If you're a wanted criminal, any data you release is just stolen property. It's inadmissible. They are using the state as a club." He paced the small room, a caged tiger. "You can't fight a shadow with a shadow. They want to paint you as a criminal in the dark." He stopped, a new, dangerous energy coming off him. "Fine." He turned to me, his eyes on fire. "We'll fight them with sunlight." He pointed out the window, toward the distant, glittering lights of the downtown waterfront. "The Greywater Seafair is tomorrow. Calder Knox is the keynote speaker. He's live streaming his announcement for the new Bayview development. He's going to be the city's hero." "So what?" I said, my voice trembling. "So," Lucian said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "We're going to give him a different show. We're going to give them the truth. All of it. In front of the entire city. Live. Go public. Go nuclear." I looked at Mira, sleeping peacefully on the sofa, her small hand clutching a paper crane. I was a temp librarian. They were billionaires and federal agents. "I'll do it," I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. "But I have one condition, only one. If it goes wrong, if everything explodes, Mira, she has to be safe. She has to be gone. Somewhere they can never, ever find her." Lucian nodded, his expression absolute, his gaze locked on mine. "That is not a condition. Rowan, that is the law." The dawn over Greywater Bay was offensively beautiful. The sky was a pale, clear blue, the sun hitting the water and shattering into a million points of light. Pier Solace was already teeming with life. The music from an antique carousel drifted on the air, mixing with the smell of roasted corn and spun sugar. It was the perfect, wholesome stage for an execution. "Mrs." Yates held Mira's hand tightly. My daughter was vibrating with excitement, clutching a new, perfectly folded yellow paper crane. My instructions to her had been simple and terrifying. "You stay with Mrs. Yates. You do not let go of her hand, no matter what. It's a game." I was anonymous, a dark green hoodie, a faded Greywater Gulls baseball cap pulled low, my hair tucked up. I looked like any other dockside resident trying to blend in. Lucian was 20 feet away, leaning against a railing, speaking quietly into a high-end earpiece. He was dressed in dark jeans and a gray quarter zip, looking like a wealthy tourist, not a crime boss. His eyes, however, were not on the view. They were everywhere else, the rooftops of the 3 surrounding buildings, the exits, the sound booth. Inez had done her work. She was already at the main sound and video booth, clipboard in hand, wearing a polo shirt with the event's logo. She looked like she was in charge. In a way, she was. At 10 a.m., the music swelled. Calder Knox walked onto the main stage, set up right at the head of the ferry pier. The massive LED screens behind him flashed his face, his smile wide and welcoming. He was here to be the city's savior. "Thank you, Greywater," he began, his voice booming over the speakers. "What a day for families, a day for community." As he spoke, I saw them. They didn't come from the main entrance. They came from the side, from a restricted access point. 6 men in dark, identical suits. They moved in a V formation. Leading them was a woman I didn't recognize. Her blonde hair pulled into a severe, tight bun. She moved with the cold, clipped energy of a weapon. They were IFCD and CIC agents, and they were not here to enjoy the fair. They fanned out, their eyes scanning the crowd. They spotted me almost instantly. My green hoodie was the signal. The woman pointed. "Rowan Price, you are in violation of a federal warrant. You are under arrest. Come with us now." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the festive air. The families nearby turned, their faces confused, their cotton candy frozen midair. Lucian was in front of me in a single fluid motion. He held up his hand, not to the agents, but to me, telling me to stay. "Good morning, officers," he said, his voice perfectly pleasant, yet it carried, "On what charge?" "Step aside, sir. This is federal business," the woman snapped. Valeria Stroud, Knox's right hand. She was leading them. "I am this woman's legal counsel," Lucian lied, his voice smooth as glass. "And these are citizens. You are required to inform her of the charges. Publicly." The crowd was turning. The phones were coming out. A circle of digital eyes was forming around us. This was the sunlight. Valeria's face tightened. She hated this. "She is under arrest for interstate data theft, espionage, and resisting a federal warrant. Now, move." "She's not resisting," Lucian said, smiling. "But you'll have to walk her through the crowd. Please, be gentle. It's a family event." He was stalling. He was buying seconds. He glanced at me, his eyes dark. "Now." I didn't run. I turned and sprinted toward the sound booth. "Rowan," Valeria shouted. 2 agents lunged for me. Inez saw me coming. She gave a sharp nod to the local DJ, a young man in oversized headphones. He hit a key. On stage, Calder Knox's microphone went dead. "And the future of this community." He tapped the mic, his smile faltering. And then a new sound boomed over the fairgrounds. My voice, clear and cold, recorded hours ago in the shipyard. "Knowledge," my voice declared, "is the property of the people." It was the quote from my favorite author, the one I'd set as the password for the encrypted file. It was the key. On the massive LED screens behind Calder Knox, his smiling face vanished. It was replaced by a high-resolution scan of a document. The header was unmistakable. Bureau of Urban Harmonics, Project Dockside Redevelopment, Eviction Protocol Sector A. Knox whirled around, his face a mask of disbelief. I grabbed the spare microphone from the sound booth table. "They're coming!" Inez yelled. I ran onto the stage, past the stunned, frozen keynote speaker. The agents were pushing through the crowd, but the wall of people, all holding up phones, made it slow. I stood in the center of the stage, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would explode. "My name is Rowan Price," I shouted into the mic, my voice shaking but echoing over the entire pier. "I'm a librarian from the Bayview branch, and I am the fugitive they are here to arrest." The crowd was dead silent. "Mister, Knox is here to talk about the future," I continued, pointing at the screen. "This is that future. This is a list of your names. 244 Dockside Walk, eviction date November 1st. 317 Marine Drive, eviction date November 3rd. I started reading the addresses, the family names. The screen behind me changed. It was an email, a personal email from Calder Knox to the head of the BUH. The words were plain. "We need to clear the census blocks for the new foundation. Use the sanitation code. condemn the buildings. A low, stunned gasp rippled through the crowd. Then it turned. It turned into a low, animal growl of pure, collective rage. Knox was apoplectic. He was screaming into his dead mic. He shouted at his security team at the side of the stage, "Cut the power! Cut the main feed now!" His men lunged for the power block. The stage went black. The LED screens died. My microphone cut out. The carousel music stopped. A few people screamed in the sudden, terrifying silence. Knox was smiling, a thin, ugly smile of triumph. A low hum started. A second passed. Then, whump! A new bank of lights, positioned on the roof of the ferry terminal opposite, flashed to life, bathing the stage in a brilliant, theatrical white. A new set of speakers, hidden under the stage bleachers, crackled on. My microphone was live again. Lucian's team, the mobile generator. He had planned for this. The crowd didn't just cheer. They roared. It was a sound of fury and defiance. Knox was trapped. His face was pale. He saw the local Greywater police officers, who were standing by the edge of the fairgrounds, arms folded, not moving. He pointed at me, screaming, "Arrest her! This is a security threat. Arrest her!" The local cops didn't budge. They were watching the thousands of phones, all pointed at the stage. They were watching their own community. Valeria Stroud was not waiting. She saw the situation vaporizing. She lunged onto the stage, ignoring the microphone, and grabbed my arm in a steel grip. "You're done," she snarled, and began to drag me, hard, toward the back of the stage. Rowan Lucian's voice. I looked down. He had vaulted the security barrier. He was shoving a sound technician out of his way. He was coming for me. The crowd surged, a wave of bodies moving toward the stage. It was chaos. I was being dragged, my feet skidding on the stage floor. And then I heard it, the sound that stopped my heart. A high, terrified scream. "Mommy!" My blood turned to ice. I ripped my arm out of Valeria's grip and spun around. The crowd had pushed forward in a wave. Misses. Yates was on the ground. Her hand was empty. Mira was gone, swallowed by the sea of panicked, angry legs. Mira. The files, Knox, Lucian, the stage, none of it mattered. I ran to the edge of the stage, my eyes scanning, my throat tearing. Mira. A sound cut through the roar of the crowd, not a shout, a whistle, two sharp, piercing notes that sliced through the air. It was Lucian. He was 10 feet below me, not looking at me, his eyes scanning the crowd. It was like watching a film run in reverse. A man in a bright yellow popcorn vendor shirt who had been 20 feet away moved. He didn't push. He just stepped, creating a space. He leaned down and in one smooth, practiced motion, lifted Mira up, setting her on his shoulders, high above the danger. He took 2 steps and passed her to another man, this one in the blue uniform of the fair's security. The security guard moved 3 feet and handed her off to a third man, in plain clothes, who walked right to the edge of the stage. Lucian was there. He took my daughter, swinging her up into his arms. He turned her face into his shoulder, shielding her with his entire body. He looked up at me, his face grim, but his eyes said one thing: "She is safe." A long, deafening blast from a ferry horn ripped through the air. I turned. Valeria Stroud was backing away. She saw Lucian had the child. She saw the crowd was completely hostile. She saw the data was out. She was cutting her losses. She pulled a small, black canister from her jacket. "This ends now," she shouted, and threw it onto the pier at the foot of the stage. It exploded with a thick, acrid, gray smoke. It wasn't tear gas. It was a visual screen. "Cover your face," Lucian roared, pulling his jacket over Mira. The smoke was everywhere. People were screaming, backing away. Through the haze, I saw her. Valeria. She was running, not into the crowd. She was running up the gangplank of a large private ferry docked at the end of the pier, the Horizon Bell. Its engines were already thrumming. She was escaping. The smoke began to clear. Lucian was beside me, having climbed onto the low stage. Mira still held tight against his chest. He was looking at the ferry. his jaw tight. "She's getting away," I said, my voice raw from the smoke. "She's his entire operation. She'll destroy everything, the servers, the backups." Lucian was about to give an order. I could see it. He was going to secure us, get us out. "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "The librarian was gone. The single mom was gone. We're not letting her go. We're getting on that." The sky, so clear and blue moments before, tore open, as if the public exposure of the data had ripped a hole in the atmosphere. A squall hit the pier with the force of a physical blow. The wind howled and the rain began again, not as a mist, but as a hard, driving, ice-cold sheet. The horizon bell's horn blasted, a deafening final warning. The gangplank was already rising. Inez Lucian roared over the wind. She was already moving. She snatched Mira from his arms and thrust her hard into the arms of Mrs. Yates, who was being helped up by one of Lucian's men. "Get her to the van. Do not move. Go." Rowan with me. The gap between the pier and the ferry was already 3 feet. A churning, gray void of water. "We can't!" I screamed. "We can—" His 2 guards, the ones who had materialized from the crowd, were already running. They didn't hesitate. They took 2 long strides and leaped, clearing the gap, landing hard on the ferry's wet deck. They didn't stumble. They turned. Weapons now drawn, not rubber bullets. These were lethally real and secured the crew members who were fumbling with the heavy mooring ropes. "Lucian, no." He grabbed my arm, his grip a steel band. "Don't look down. On 3, 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. He half threw, half dragged me with him. We were airborne for a heart-stopping second. The world just gray water and screaming wind, and then we landed, hard on the metal deck. I skidded on the wet surface, my hands and knees stinging. Lucian landed beside me, as perfectly balanced as a panther. Inez was right behind us, landing with a grunt, her face grim. The ferry gave a powerful lurch, its engines at full throttle. We were moving. The pier, the crowd, Knox's rage. All of it instantly became a blurred, distant tableau. We were trapped. The deck was chaos. The crew, about 5 men, were shouting, staring at Lucian's guards, their hands raised. "Clear the deck, get inside." Valeria Stroud was standing in the main cabin doorway, 10 yards away. The wind whipped her blonde hair across her face, plastering it to her skin. She looked like a drowned Valkyrie, her face a mask of white-hot rage. She was holding a short, heavy-barreled gun. It looked industrial, ugly. "Get off my ship! Armand!" she screamed over the howl of the storm. "Drop it, lady!" one of Lucian's guards yelled, his pistol leveled at her chest. Crack thump. Valeria fired. The sound was sharp, followed by a heavy, wet impact. The shot didn't hit the guard. It struck the metal bulkhead next to him, leaving a small dent. A thick, black rubber slug ricocheted, spinning harmlessly across the deck. "Rubber," the guard yelled, not flinching. "Suppression rounds. She's non-lethal." "Stand down," Lucian commanded. His men lowered their weapons, just slightly, but their eyes never left her. The ferry cleared the breakwater and hit the open, churning chop of the bay. The deck rose and fell violently. The rain was coming in sideways, stinging like needles. Lucian held up his hands, open palms forward. He was completely soaked, his gray quarter-zip plastered to his chest. He began to walk toward her, one slow, deliberate step at a time, his feet planted wide for balance on the heaving deck. "We can talk about this like adults, Valeria." "We are way past talking. You bastard," she shrieked, bracing herself in the doorway. "You ruined everything. This was my way out." Crack thump. She fired again, this time at his feet. The slug skipped off the deck near his boot. He didn't even break stride. "Knox ruined it," Lucian said, his voice calm, yet it cut through the wind. "You just happened to be standing next to him when the building fell." "This ship was my payment, my exit strategy," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. She was losing it. Her eyes darted from Lucian to me, to Inez, to the armed men. She was a cornered animal, and she was calculating. "Wait," she said, her voice suddenly dropping, becoming sly, conspiratorial. "There's another way. There's a deal here." She pointed the gun at him. "You don't care about the files. You want her." Her chin jerked toward me. I was still on my knees, shivering. My stomach turned to ice. I was the bargaining chip, the spoils, the distraction he enjoyed. I felt a familiar, cold wave of dread. I was just a thing to be traded. "You keep the girl," Valeria said, her words rushed. "I take the ship. I wipe the servers in the hold. I disappear. Knox loses his data, his money, and his top operator. You win. I win. Just let me go." Lucian stopped. He was 5 feet from her. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was cold, sharp, and full of contempt. "You still think you work for Knox?" he said, shaking his head, the rain dripping from his hair. "What are you talking about? You're still thinking in spreadsheets. You're still moving assets around, trying to cut a profit." He took the last step. So he was standing just outside the range of her arm. "She's not a number on Calder Knox's balance sheet. Valeria, she is not a distraction, and you are not walking away from this." His total, absolute refusal, the way he dismissed the very idea of me as a commodity, sent a jolt of warmth through my frozen body. The crew of the Horizon Belle, who had been huddled near the bow, were watching the exchange. They were trapped between Lucian's armed men and the woman who signed their paychecks. I saw it, hanging in a red metal bracket on the bulkhead, just inside the cabin door, a battery-powered bullhorn. While Lucian held her gaze, I scrambled to my feet. "Rowan, stay back," Lucian ordered. Valeria's head whipped toward me. She saw my intent. She swung the gun. Crack thump. The rubber bullet slammed into the wall where I had been a second before. I lunged. Grabbing the bullhorn, I ripped it from its cradle and flicked the switch. A high-pitched squeal of feedback pierced the air. "Attention. Crew of the Horizon Belle," my voice amplified, boomed across the deck, godlike, silencing the wind. Valeria froze. This was a new, unexpected variable. "My name is Rowan Price. The woman holding that gun is Valeria Stroud. She works for Calder Knox, and she is lying to you." "Shut her up!" Valeria shrieked, firing again. I ducked behind a stack of life vests as the rubber slug tore into them. "She's running because we just exposed a massive criminal conspiracy, Calder Knox, and the BUH are illegally evicting hundreds of families from dockside." A big man in a bright orange fishing slicker, clearly the captain, yelled back, "We know we live in dockside, lady." "Then you should know this," I shouted. The words from the file burned into my brain. I'd read every line. "This is from the non-disclosure agreement between Neon Harbor Ventures and the Bureau of Urban Harmonics. In the event of public disclosure, all third-party vendor contracts, including outstanding payroll and pension contributions, are rendered null and void." A dead, heavy silence fell over the deck. The only sound was the wind and the angry, churning water. The captain stared at Valeria, his face pale. "Null and void. That's why the payroll transfer was delayed this morning. He never intended to pay us for this charter. He was going to cut us loose." The deep, thrumming vibration of the ferry's engines, which had been pushing us at full throttle out into the bay, suddenly changed. They wound down, sputtered, and died. The Horizon Belle lost all momentum. It went from cutting the waves to wallowing in them. "Well, what did you do?" Valeria screamed, her voice no longer a command. "Start the engines. Start them." The captain stepped out of the wheelhouse, his face set in stone. "Engine controls are locked, ma'am. Locked from the bridge. Union safety protocol. Looks like we have a labor dispute." In that exact second, the boat, no longer powered forward, was caught by a massive wave. It rolled violently, the deck dropping out from under us. Valeria, unprepared, cried out, stumbling forward, her arms pinwheeling for balance. Inez moved. She was a flash of dark motion. She didn't sought attack Valeria. She lunged forward, her foot kicking out, not at her body but at her wrist, a single, vicious, targeted kick. The rubber bullet gun flew from Valeria's grasp. It spun in the air, a dark arc against the gray sky, hit the railing and disappeared into the churning water below. The tension vanished, sucked out into the storm. Valeria Stroud stood there, disarmed, her chest heaving. She looked broken, not dangerous. Just a woman in a wetsuit, trapped on a dead boat, her last option gone. I lowered the bullhorn. I walked toward her, my hands empty, my legs shaky on the rolling deck. "Are you just another person he used?" I asked, my voice quiet, no longer needing the amplifier. "Did he promise you this boat? A new life, was he gonna null and void you, too, Valeria?" She stared at me, her face pale. Rain, or maybe tears, streamed down her cheeks. She opened her mouth, her defiance crumbling, leaving something raw and human behind. "Bring!" The sound was shockingly mundane, a video call. It was coming from a ruggedized tablet mounted on the cabin wall, just inside the doorway. Valeria's face hardened, the brief flicker of humanity gone. She turned and stabbed the accept button. Calder Knox's face filled the screen. He was not smiling. He was in the back of a car, his face a mask of pure, incandescent rage. "You incompetent fool," he shrieked. "Where is my ship? Where are you?" "It's over, Calder," Valeria said, her voice dead. "It is not over." His camera phone was shaky. He fumbled with it, turning it around. The image swam, then focused. He was showing me the pier, the chaos, the crowd, and in the center of it, Mrs. Yates. She was on the ground. A man in a dark suit was standing over her. And he was holding Mira. "No!" The sound was ripped from my lungs, a raw, primal scream. "Give me back my property on Rowan," Knox snarled, his face returning to the screen. "The original USB drive, not the copy. The original, or the kid loses her mom, permanently." I was paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. Lucian stepped in front of me, his body shielding me from the screen. He looked directly into the camera. He was no longer the calm negotiator. He was no longer the man who had kissed me. He was the man from the shipyard. He was the law. His voice was a low, terrifying promise, a vibration that chilled the air more than the rain. "You touch my family, Knox," he said, "and you will have no shore left to land on." My legs gave out. The image of Mira, held by a man who answered to Knox, shattered my entire world. I sank to the wet deck, my hands fumbling in my rented bag, pulling out the small, silver USB drive. I have it right here. Tell him I'll give it to him. Just let her go." "No." Lucian's voice was flat. He did not look at me. He stared at the small screen, at Knox's face, twisted with a triumphant rage. "He won't stop. He'll take the drive, and then he will eliminate the witness, and her child." "Then what do we do?" Inez cried. Her hands clenched. The storm was raging around us, the boat heaving. "You want an exchange, Calder," Lucian said, his voice dropping into that terrifying cold register. "You want insurance. You want real property. You can't have this drive, but I'll offer you a trade." Knox's eyes narrowed. "What trade?" "There is no trade. I have the girl." "Me," Lucian said. The wind and the rain seemed to stop. I looked up, frozen. "What the hell are you talking about?" Knox snarled. "I have files, too, Calder," Lucian said, his voice lethally soft. "You don't just want Rowan's silence. You want my silence. You paid the Armand Circle a great deal of money for gray services when you were building Neon Harbor. The Port Authority bribes, the union busting, the accidents that cleared your competitors, the real files, not copies." Knox's face went white. He had not been expecting this. "Let the woman and the child go," Lucian continued, his voice a steel bar. "Let them walk off that pier, completely untouched. You get Valeria and this ship, and you get me. And every file I have on you, that is the deal. My silence for theirs." He was doing it. He was trading his life, his freedom, his entire empire, for a temporary librarian and her daughter. He was trading himself for me. "No," I whispered. The word was lost in the wind. "Lucian, don't," Inez warned, her face pale. "He's making a smart deal, girl," Knox sneered at me from the screen. "Take it." "No." My voice was louder this time. I staggered to my feet, my legs shaking. I stepped in front of Lucian, my back to the screen, facing him. "You don't get to do that." "Rowan, this is not your decision," he commanded, his eyes hard. "It is," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I won't trade your freedom for mine. I won't be the woman you handled. I am not collateral." I was so terrified, so furious, I could barely breathe. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached out, my hand trembling, and I grabbed his. I shoved my fingers between his, lacing our hands together, a desperate, defiant grip. I turned back to the screen, pulling him with me, forcing him to stand beside me. "We are in this together, Knox. You get nothing, you get neither of us." Lucian's hand, which had been rigid, suddenly tightened on mine. He squeezed, a short, sharp pressure. He looked down at our joined hands, then at my face. The coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, startled astonishment. A harsh, barking laugh cut through the tense air. It was Valeria. She was looking at the screen, at Knox's sputtering, furious face, and then at us, our hands locked together. "Well, Calder," she said, her voice dripping with a new, bitter amusement. "It looks like you've lost. You lost your data, you lost your leverage, and you just lost me." "You work for me," Knox shrieked, his face purpling. "No." Valeria walked to the tablet, her wet face filling the screen. "I just quit. The deal is canceled. This ship is dead in the water. And you are standing on a pier holding a 6-year-old girl hostage in front of 5,000 cell phones. You are finished." She didn't hang up. She reached for the heavy-duty satellite phone that connected her to her private security channel. She barked into it. "All teams, stand down. The deal is void. I'm out. Terminating channel." She didn't just end the call. She threw the expensive, rugged phone onto the steel deck. It skittered across the wet surface and smashed into the bulkhead, the battery flying out. "What now?" Inez said, looking at Lucian. "He won't just let us go," one of Lucian's guards said, his pistol still trained on the churning gray water. "He's not that stupid." "No, he's not," Inez said, her own phone buzzing in her pocket. She looked at the text, her face going grim. "Spotter on the roof. He's not stupid, he's desperate. 4 fast attack boats just left the South Harbor. Unmarked. Black. They're Bowie tactical. They'll be here in 3 minutes." Knox was sending his private army, the masked men, the ones who didn't follow police procedure. Inez didn't hesitate. She ran to the emergency kit on the wall, ripped a flare gun from its mount, and ran to the railing. She pointed it at the gray, pouring sky and fired. A brilliant red star shot upward, a desperate, bleeding cry against the storm. "That's the extraction call for our own team," she yelled over the wind. "But they're on the other side of the bay. They're 10 minutes out. Knox's men are 2. This was the end. They would board the ship, kill everyone, seize the drive, and sink the ferry. They would blame it on the storm. No witnesses. My mind was a white-hot panic. Knox's boats, the extraction, the USB. Why did he want the original drive so badly he was screaming for it? He knew I had made a copy. He knew I had shown it. Unless he thought the copy was just the screen grabs. He thought the original contained the digital signatures, the routing codes, the real, verifiable proof. He was right. "The server," I whispered, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "What?" Lucian said, his voice tight. "The file I uploaded from your kitchen." "Inez," I said, the plan forming in a single, terrifying flash. "It's sitting on a dark server. It's the whole thing. The raw archive." I set up a dead man switch, a single email. I ripped my rented purse off my shoulder, dumping its contents onto the wet deck, my wallet, my keys, my cheap, beaten-up laptop. I set it to send the server link and the decryption key to every journalist, every constitutional lawyer, and every community action group I could find. All I have to do is hit send. "Boats at 1,000 yards, the guard yelled. We could hear the high-pitched whine of their engines now. "Captain," I screamed at the man in the orange slicker, who was watching us with wide, terrified eyes. "Your ship, you have satellite internet for navigation." "We do," he yelled back, "but it's hardwired to the console." "Can you patch it? Can I use it?" "Rowan, this is not the time," Lucian said, pulling me back. This is the only time. I tore my hand from his. "They're not here for the drive. They're here to silence us. The only way to win is to make it so loud they can't—" The captain saw the look in my eyes. He nodded. He yanked a thick yellow Ethernet cable from a port under his console and threw it to me. "That's the sat feed. It's all yours. Lady God help us." I plugged it in. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the laptop open. It chimed, waking from sleep. I knelt on the deck, the rain hammering my back. The connected icon flashed. I pulled up my email. The draft was sitting there, waiting. "Boats at 500 yards. They're hailing us, ordering us to prepare to be boarded." I typed my password. My fingers slipped. Access denied. "Damn it." "Here." Lucian's hand closed over mine, steadying it. "Breathe. Rowan, do it." I typed it again. Mira Bayview 7. Access granted. My finger hovered over the send button. The black speedboats were surrounding us, forming a deadly circle. Masked men, dressed in black tactical gear, were visible, leveling assault weapons at us. "Do it, Rowan," Lucian said, his voice a low growl in my ear. He didn't stay kneeling beside me. He stood up. He turned his back to me. Facing the lead boat, he became a human shield, his broad body protecting my small laptop screen, protecting me. He was a target, clear and defiant. "This is your final warning," a voice boomed from the lead boat's loudspeaker. "Prepare to be—" I hit the button. A small, digital swoosh sound, an email icon flying away, and then the three most beautiful words I had ever read. "Upload complete. Your message has been sent." "It's done," I whispered. Lucian turned, his face unreadable in the gray light. On the pier, half a mile away, a strange, magical thing happened. A few phones in the crowd lit up, then a dozen, then 100. It was a wave of digital fire, spreading through the panicked, rain-soaked crowd as the email blast hit. Reporters, bloggers, lawyers, and random citizens, all getting the link at the exact same time. On the black boats, the tactical agents, who had been preparing grappling hooks, paused. They were looking back at the shore. Their own phones were buzzing. Their orders were to seize a fugitive and a stolen drive in a covert operation. But the data was out. It was everywhere. Their mission was no longer covert. It was a public act of war against a woman who had just armed the entire city with the truth. They were on thousands of live streams, their weapons visible, their targets clear. The lead agent lowered his rifle. He spoke into his radio, his voice frantic. He was no longer an enforcer. He was a witness. On the tablet, still sitting on the console, Knox's video feed was live. He was screaming, "Board the ship, take them all, that is a direct order. Do you hear me?" Valeria Stroud, who had been watching everything, walked over to the tablet. A small, cold smirk touched her lips. She looked at Knox's apoplectic face, and she hit the speakerphone button. Knox's voice, raw and unhinged, suddenly boomed across the entire deck, loud enough for the men on the boats to hear. "I don't care about the data I paid for those politicians. I own the BUH. I own the CIC. I want that woman's head. Sink the ship. Blame it on the storm. Just get it done." A full, public, undeniable confession. The lead BUH agent on the boat stared, horrified. He barked a single, sharp command. The engines on all 4 boats revved. They turned, not toward us, but back toward the harbor, fleeing the scene, fleeing the confession, fleeing the sunlight. The rain, as if a switch had been thrown, suddenly lightened. The wind died down. Through the clearing mist, a new boat appeared. It was not black and tactical. It was white and blue, with a steady, official light. The Greywater Bay Civil Coast Guard, Inez's other call. It pulled alongside. A man in a crispy, dry uniform looked at the scene, bewildered. He saw our disabled ferry. He saw Valeria Stroud standing alone, her hands up. He saw Lucien's armed men, now lowering their weapons, and he saw me, a woman in a ruined silk dress, kneeling on the deck, slowly closing her laptop. Is everyone all right here?" the officer asked. Lucien put his arm around my shoulder, pulling me tightly against his side. He looked at the officer, and for the first time, I saw the exhaustion in his face. "We are now," he said. "We'd like to come ashore, and we have a crime to report." The next morning, Greywater Bay did not just wake up, it ignited. The data I had sent, the raw, verifiable proof, was a digital accelerant. It was not just a news story, it was an inferno. Independent podcasts, investigative journalists, university law clinics, and community action groups tore the files apart, analyzing them live, cross-referencing the BUH contracts with the CIC's sudden audits. By 10 a.m., the system that had been a monolithic, impenetrable wall had fractured. The public outcry, fueled by Knox's own videotaped confession from the ferry, was too loud to ignore. The mayor, facing a tidal wave of public fury, resigned. The acting replacement, a councilwoman from the embattled Dockside district, held an emergency press conference at noon. Her first act was to announce the immediate and total suspension of both the Coastal Integrity Commission and the Bureau of Urban Harmonics. Calder Knox had been temporarily detained by the UIC's marshals, not for the evictions, but for the federal crime of threatening a federal witness, me. His empire of urban harmonics was frozen. The acting mayor's second announcement was the Dockside Resident Protection Plan. All pending evictions were declared null and void. And third, the Bayview Library branch would not be closed. It would be expanded, fully funded by the emergency civil forfeiture funds seized from Neon Harbor Ventures. My name, Rowan Price, was mentioned. I was no longer a fugitive. I was a civic hero. They offered me a new position, Director of Community Reading Programs. Justice. It turned in. Wasn't always slow. Sometimes it was a flood. I saw Valeria Stroud one last time, in the lobby of the federal building. She was in a simple gray suit, her hair down. She had cooperated fully, given the federal agents the keys to Knox's offshore servers. She received a deal, leniency for her testimony. She stopped in front of me, Mira holding my hand. Valeria looked at me, her face pale, but for the first time, free of that manic, hunted energy. "Freedom," she said, her voice quiet. "Sometimes it's just switching to the right side at the right time. Good luck, librarian." She held out her hand. I shook it. Things changed. Inez, free from the glittering cage of the Aurelian room, used the severance pay Lucien had given her to open a vocational kitchen in a reclaimed warehouse in Dockside, teaching at-risk teenagers high-end culinary skills. It was anonymously funded by the Armand Circle. Lucien, I learned, had also made a change. He had stepped away from the hot seat. He had convened a family council, men and women from the old families, and had begun to transfer power. He was moving his gray services into legitimate investments, turning his network from one of problem-solving to one of community protection. He was still the most dangerous man in Greywater Bay, but he was slowly, agonizingly, trying to build something that could withstand the light. A week later, I was in the park by the bay, the same park where the fair had been. Today, there was no carousel music, just the sound of gulls and the gentle waves. Mira was at the playground, finally playing, no one watching her. Lucien appeared beside me, his hands in the pockets of a simple wool coat. We stood in silence for a long time, watching my daughter swing. "She looks happy," he said. "She's safe." He nodded, his gaze on the water. I have lived by my laws for a very long time. Rowan, they were hard. They were clear. They protected me. They protected my world. He turned to me, his dark eyes vulnerable, stripped of all the power and the command. But they were not built for this. They were not built for you. He took a slow, unsteady breath. If you want me, if you will have me, I am willing to write a new law, a law just for us. I looked at him, the man who had ordered men, who had broken bones, who had saved my life and my daughter's life, and who had, in the end, been willing to sacrifice his own. I think, I said, my voice soft, I'd like to help you with that. That night, in my new apartment, a bright, airy 2-bedroom on the top floor of a clean, safe building overlooking the bay, paid for with the back pay and damages the city had awarded me, we found our law. Mira was fast asleep in her own room, her whale nightlight casting a familiar, peaceful blue glow. The windows were open. The sound of the city, now a comfort, not a threat, drifted in with the smell of the sea. Lucian was standing in my living room, looking as uncertain as I had ever seen him. I went to him. I put my hands on his chest, right where I had on the balcony, right over his heart. It was beating, fast and steady. "Stay," I whispered. He didn't need any other words. His mouth came down on mine, and this time, there was no terror, no adrenaline, no desperation. There was just want and time. It was a long, slow, devastating kiss. It was a promise, a conversation. His lips were warm and sure, and he kissed me with a depth of feeling that left me breathless. My hands slid up, lacing behind his neck, pulling him down. His hands, those powerful, calloused hands, found my waist. They moved slowly, his thumbs tracing the line of my ribs through the thin cotton of my shirt. It was an exploration, not a conquest. His touch was electric, a fire just held in check. I felt him tense, his fingers stopping as if asking permission. In answer, I pressed closer, my body molding against his. I felt him let out a shuddering breath, a small, involuntary sound of surrender. He kissed my jaw, my throat, his breath hot against my skin, his stubble a delicious friction. We were breathing in each other's rhythm, our hearts hammering in a frantic, shared cadence. We broke apart, both of us panting, our foreheads resting against each other. His eyes were dark, almost black, and filled with an emotion that made my stomach clench. He was in complete control, and yet he was completely undone. He chose, as he had in the safe house, to stop, to honor the boundary, to let the feeling, the staggering, overwhelming feeling, be enough for now. He stepped back, his hands still holding mine, a shaky smile on his face. "I brought you something," he said, his voice rough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple brass key. He placed it on my coffee table. My heart sank, just for a second. He saw the look on my face and shook his head, that rare, gentle smile appearing. "It's not to my house. Rowan, my world is complicated. This isn't that." He nudged the key. "It's the key to the warehouse space on Pier 7, the one next to Inez's kitchen. It's yours, for the reading club." I stared at it. "Lucian, I can't—" "Your future," he said, his voice firm, cutting me off. "It is not tied to me. It's yours. I was just hoping I could be the one you call when you need someone to build the shelves." I looked at the key, and I looked at him, the man who had offered me his life, and was now offering me something more, his respect. "I don't need an owner, Lucian," I said, my voice thick. "I don't need protection. I need a partner." He nodded, a sharp, sudden movement, and I saw something I never thought I would see. His eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. My phone buzzed on the table. A text. It was from the community lawyer who had taken on the class action suit. "The court just accepted the collective filing. They've certified the class. The case against the BUH and the Neon Harbor estate is moving forward. Your evidence. Rowan. It's the foundation for everything. We're going to win." I showed him the phone. He read it, and then he pulled me to him, his arms wrapping around me, holding me tight. We walked out onto the small balcony. The Greywater Bay was spread out before us, a blanket of dark water and glittering lights. It was no longer a place of danger. It was just home. Lucian held me from behind, his arms crossed over my stomach, his chin resting on the top of my head. I leaned back against his chest, a perfect, solid fit. The knot that I had carried in my chest for my entire life, the knot of fear, of being alone, of being a target, finally, unraveled. His power was no longer a chain. It was a shield, and his love, it was not an escape. It was the place I had been running to all along. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below and let us know. Share your thoughts, and let's connect. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.